Welcome back. I'm Alfred Lamont Weber, and we're here with Edward de Boer, who's coming to us from the Netherlands. Welcome, Edward.
Thank you, Alfred.
Um, Edward de Boer has contacted us with regard to an issue under international humanitarian law and a great humanitarian injustice of many dimensions, which Exopolitics TV and News Inside Out has been involved in. Uh, uh, Both members of our editorial staff, myself, as well as our uh, correspondent and co-editor John Kelly, and that is the Hampstead apparent and alleged Hampstead pedocriminal ring, Hampstead, UK. And now the case of whistleblower Sabine McNeill, who has just been unlawfully, unjustly, and against all evidence been sentenced to 9 years imprisonment, which is a violation of many different norms of international humanitarian law, including the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the Convention for the Protection of Journalists, the common law and criminal statutes of Great Britain, which provide for fair and impartial administration of justice and fair and impartial uh, policing and testimony of um, sworn officers of the law and sworn judiciary. To sum it up in the crudest terms, the pedocracy, the pedocriminal gangs and circles and underground in England, which is being more and more disunited and deconstructed by its pedocriminal networks, has now stooped to new heights in the case of the new depths, rather, in the case of the criminal cover-up of the pedocriminal uh, uh, rings and activities at Hampstead. And we're going to get in depth here. Edward de Boer is a distinguished composer in Holland who contacted us because of the injustice in this case. As a concerned private citizen, he's summarized a lot of the evidence. We covered the evidence of how two children who cannot be named uh, were unlawfully and against the evidence taken away from their mother because of sexual and physical abuse and enforced cannibalism imposed on them by a pedocriminal ring operating in Hampstead, England. I'm just going to read briefly from the medical report uh, performed by Dr. Deborah Hodes, MD, on the two children. Summary. all of this will be in the article that accompanies this interview. Summary. Uh, Summary of A and G by Dr. Hodes. In my opinion, A and G are suffering significant harm as evidenced by the following. One, both children have physical signs of physical abuse that support their allegations. And their allegations are that they were forced into pedocriminal activity at their schools as part of a pedocriminal ring that uh, was in operation at Hampstead, England. Both children have physical signs of sexual abuse that support their allegations. They have symptoms of post-traumatic stress. It is now understood from a 2007 substantiated study of child sexual abuse that retraction occurs far more commonly, 16% in the series, than previously thought. In my opinion, the extensive and detailed accounts given by both children that were repeated to different professionals contain details of sexual acts that such young children would need to have the direct experience of. Note, in order to be able to describe them is the unwritten implication. To put it simply, Dr. Hodes is stating that there is physical evidence in support of both sets of allegations by the children, namely that they were victims of a pedocriminal ring in Hampstead, England, which really highlights how farcical the entire "they were coached" end of uh, quotation counter narrative really is. Because children who have been coached to make false allegations and that's the assumption uh, under which Sabine McNeill was just sentenced to 9 years imprisonment after false testimony by the police uh, and false testament by the authorities and a false and unlawful ruling by the judge. Um, because children who have been coached to make false allegations in order to influence a custody battle, we are told, were not even coached to lie about the minor physical injuries they suffered at the hands, allegedly, of the mother's partner. What kind of coaching is that? It really shows the desperation to protect that this prosperous and absurd notion was even floated as the counter-narrative. It is pathetic and insulting and truly laughable. And there is are the references to the medical report and University College London Hospitals NHS Foundation Trust. So the documentation here of sexual abuse and physical abuse of the children, A and G, um, is extensive and undeniable. And I myself hold a certificate from the Harvard School of Public Health and was an administrator of the federally qualified and award-winning Community Health Center in Brownsville, Texas, overseeing 20 physicians, 120 nurses, and 90,000 patient encounters a year during the 1990s. I am now just wanted to give this context and this introduction because we have seen that in England, what has occurred is that the pedocracy, the pedocriminal secret government and bureaucracy, is now attempting to reverse the exposure of how they introduced a pedocriminal network in Hampstead, England, that infiltrated the schools and other local institutions and was enforced by the local constabulary police. And this network reached into, as our programming shows, even the then Prime Minister's office, David Cameron, who is responsible ultimately for the Brexit. Uh, that has brought a good deal of separation and political chaos, many would argue, to the United Kingdom itself. Um, and so this is yet one more act of the pedocracy. So with this introduction, I'm going to turn it over to you, Edouard, and ask you to summarize for us, because I know that you have prepared a very in-depth document, the case of Sabine McNeill being sentenced to 9 years imprisonment. Another person was also sentenced somewhat a bit differently. The story is now presented to the world by the pedocracy or pedocriminal bureaucracy.
Mm.
The history in a nutshell, and strange things occurring around the case. So thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, Alfred. Well, you have said a number of things that I had put in my mind of not to forget. So thank you for that. I would like to first to bring the story as it is now presented to the world, and let me just read it so I do it correctly. So what is now has appeared in the newspapers is Sabine McNeill is an evil, deluded old lady who for some reason harassed innocent people living in the Hampstead area in London by accusing them of weird things like involvement in the eating of babies and dancing with their skulls. She kept doing so in spite of repeated warnings that she should stop. In doing so, she caused a lot of damage to those innocent people. And that's why she was eventually sentenced to remain in prison for 9 years. She is, by the way, she's at the moment 74, so she has to be in jail until she's 83. And she is disabled as a result of a car accident many years ago. You already told the history in a nutshell about the Hampstead case itself, and also some very poignant quotations from the report by Dr. Hodes. Let me go back to, first of all, to the coaching story, because there is a bit of complication there. I reread parts of the report myself today, and especially in the first of the two reports, you find that there are different allegations by the children about injuries. There's physical abuse, but that's mainly on the part of the then boyfriend of the mother, and there's sexual abuse, which is done by the father and his group of people. This makes things a bit complicated, and I've seen also more YouTube films where people say, so this boyfriend is the real crook. What I remember, what I have heard back in 2015 is it all came out during holidays in Morocco, where the boyfriend, the mother, and the children, they went, and the boyfriend had suspicions about that there was something going on with the children, and he wanted to
Yeah,
get.
sorry. Are there two different boyfriends that you're talking about?
No, this is the one and
Y-
only boyfriend.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but so that there's Ricky Dearman, the
That's the
current,
yeah.
that's the father, right?
Yes. Yeah. I wanted to not to mention his name, but anyway,
Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so that the so that you mentioned that there were false allegations made by the state against the mother's boyfriend. Does she still have that boyfriend?
As far as I'm aware, uh, no. I think they separated.
I
Well,
see.
they just finished. Oh, they're no longer in view. I have no idea how they
Oh,
are. Where?
okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this, what I remember that the boyfriend and the mother told themselves in various interviews is that indeed the boyfriend used a degree of violence to extract the truth from the children, and I think it's something that makes matters a bit complicated. So the children complained of things like licks, as they call it, with a spoon, and even causing scars. Um, and well, even words like water torture and so on. I think this holiday was horrible in Morocco. There is also the story that uh, the mother and the boyfriend, they became ill because the children they put poo on the toothbrushes of the parents, and so they became very ill. And I think also the children, it's obvious they are very traumatized. So also they admit that they are not very much impressed by pain, for instance. So I think the boyfriend, he went rather far in order to extract the confessions from the children, who were very frightened because, as you can read in the report, they were frightened that their father would kill the whole family if they would ever say something about this. So I want to also to make this clear because let's not focus on only the one thing and not on the other thing. But then, that if the whole story would have been coaching, then you get some very strange things. The first of all, I would like to mention the tattoos. The children describe in great detail tattoos and similar markings on the private parts of the alleged abusers. Now, if you want to coach anyone into telling a story, then I think it's very dangerous to describe tattoos that you can't possibly know that they are there and what they look like. And the very strange thing is that there was never an investigation into these tattoos. And well, for instance, if you remember anything of the Michael Jackson case, that he was accused of, well, doing inappropriate things with children. He was lifted out of his bed to check the description of his private parts, if that matched with description of the children. So, and when I imagine that someone would accuse me of something horrible like that, the first thing I would do myself is go to not just one doctor, but to several doctors to show them my private parts and just let them see that the allegations were false. Had something like this been done early in the Hampstead case, there would have been no case because it would have been clear from the start. And this would also mean that Sabine would now not be in jail in all probability. So that's one of the very strange things. Then if you want to coach children, then you want to, let's say you want to damage your ex, then it's far more efficient to say that this ex sexually abused the children instead of adding things like that they killed babies and ate their flesh and danced with skulls and things like that, because it makes your whole story completely unbelievable. So it's not very effective to fabricate such a story in order to be, well, to be believable. Yeah, yeah. And the funny thing also, that's when we go back to the beginning. Sabine McNeill, as an evil, deluded old lady, telling such terrible stories, and then the judge coming to the conclusion that everyone who believed those allegations of the children was stupid, foolish, evil. It would have fitted if there had not been sexual abuse, because then you would have a story of crazy people who coach children into telling fantasies, and the judge could say, well, they're just crazy people. But the fact that there is sexual abuse makes it different. That is proven. So that has taken place. So then the question is, who did the sexual abuse? Well, in theory, that might have been the boyfriend, of course, as well. But then it just doesn't make sense as well that he did it. If you do it yourself, then you don't fabricate a story to blame it on someone else. Then you just keep quiet, to mention one of the things. So the whole story is completely illogical from beginning to end. And what is also very remarkable is the focus on the weird part of the story. You would say that if children, they confess to the police a whole story, including sexual abuse, and then going on with things like eating of babies and far out things, then you start with investigating the sexual abuse, which was confirmed. And then you go to the alleged perpetrators, you start your investigation there, and you see where the story will bring you. Instead, what has been done is focusing from the beginning on the weird things, and then saying, well, this is so far out, this is so weird, so the whole story from beginning to end is a lie and is the result of coaching. That doesn't make sense as well. Then I have my list with a few other things. When there are two judges. There is one judge who gave her verdict on the whole story of the children, and she came to the conclusion that the mother and then boyfriend had coached the children. And she added also that whoever believed the children was foolish or evil, as I said a minute ago. So this implied that the judge gave her judgment not just about the people involved, but also to the whole world. So if you believe anything of this story, you are either foolish or evil yourself. So that would include me, which is strange. You don't need to do that. And also the second verdict, now the verdict of Sabine, is really very menacing. 9 years for what she is accused of. I've searched on the internet. Many priests and other people who have been accused of damaging children by sexually abusing them have received sentences less than this. So it's quite out of proportion. Yes, you mentioned this other person. I can mention Belinda Mackenzie. She was sentenced, and I read again, to a 2-year prison suspended sentence, whereby she was obligated never to mention Hampstead again, to remove everything she had ever published on the internet about the case. The funny thing is that you could say similar things about a website with the name of Hoaxted Research, this website aims at proving that all of it is a hoax. Also, they have covered the whole Hampstead case, and also in great detail the sentencing of Sabine. And they have never been impeded whatsoever in doing so. And to me, that seems like a double standard. And I've occasionally visited this website. I don't like it, so I didn't do it very often. But what strikes me in this website is the amount of, the German word for it is Schadenfreude, so deriving pleasure from the hurt, seeing other people being hurt. And there are also some YouTube channels related to this website, and they have such funny names as MK Ultra 666 or Mackenzie Devils, and the avatar names of people who are active there are names like El Coyote or Snake Logan or Shiva Burton. Again, I feel this Schadenfreude, and I must say, all these things together, they don't help to convince me. So, if there had been this thorough investigation at the start, there would have been no urge for the members of the public or Sabine herself to keep digging into this Hampstead case and to keep it high profile in support of the children. So that's what you get when this investigation that ought to have taken place doesn't take place. Now you, in your introduction, you dived straight into the whole matter of pedo rings and so on, which is for the people in my circles, it's quite a story to take in. So I would like to tell you a little bit about how I got into this knowledge step by step, in order maybe to help some of the listeners to gradually take it all in, because there is a tendency to say, well, this is so far-fetched, this can't possibly be true. And especially the weird bits about dancing with skulls in the children allegations. Most people will say this is too far out for me to accept. For me, it all started with the 9/11 story, when I found out that the official story just can't be true. And there are so many elements that I can mention only a few things. There are so many things that indicate controlled demolition. There was this building 7, building 6 that were not hit by anything at all and just were heavily damaged as well. You had the testimony of Judy Wood, who said, where did all the rubble go? You have this newsreader who announced on live television that the second of the 2 towers had fallen, but at the background it was still standing, so it was a mistaken timing. You had the hole in the Pennsylvania where this supposed alleged plane had fallen into, but it was so small, etc., etc. Yeah. When you go a bit further, you have the children reciting kite plane must hit steel, so remote controlled plane must hit something. You have the pilots who testify that with all the skills they have, they couldn't possibly hit a tower with a plane with such a speed at first go, well, etc., etc. So this story just cannot be true. Well, that's one thing in itself, but for me it had huge implications. It meant that the ones who didn't do it, the ones who were accused to do it didn't do it, and the ones who did do it got away with it. So this means that such people must be very powerful in order to have gotten away with it, and they must have been evil enough to devise such a plan, and that means they will be evil enough to devise more things like this. Then, okay, is it all right for you, by the way, Alfred, that I have my talk like this?
This is absolutely wonderful that you are deconstructing the Hampstead uh, pedocriminal ring and explaining it for others as a false flag,
Yeah,
and explaining how the whistleblower uh, here, uh, Sabine McNeill, how she, in a way, is in the position of a whistleblower in parallel cases like 9/11, where
yeah,
we know that 9/11 whistleblowers have been subjected to a great deal of social disruption and social persecution by the deep state,
yeah,
who are the perpetrators of 9/11. In the similar case, we found in our reporting, News Inside Out, of the Hampstead pedocriminal case, as we mentioned earlier, that it reached up to the Prime Minister's office of the time, which was David Cameron.
mhm,
So, with that type of corrupted authority structures involved in the cover up, it's no surprise that you would have corrupt judiciary, corrupt prosecution, corrupted evidence, and corrupted witnesses involved in the prosecution. And
yeah,
you're uh, providing a context that people can understand. Oh, this is like a false flag, where,
yeah.
like 9/11, because this involves the deep state. So back to you.
Yeah, well, indeed, at the time I didn't know the English expression, the rabbit hole goes very deep. But when you start from there with 9/11 and then you go further and further, then, well, you discover more and more. That's how it went in my case. And the next step was, for instance, David Wilcock. I followed his blog for quite some time, and I think he wrote some brilliant books like the Source Field Investigation and like his free internet book Financial Tyranny. I think it was in 2011, and where he analyzes the whole worldwide structure to do with finances. And there also he mentions things like deep state, cabal, and also there is mention of satanic ritual abuse. What we haven't mentioned yet is many people in those high circles of power appear to be followers of a Luciferian cult, followers of, well, the name Aleister Crowley comes to mind, and that's a very special belief system with also a very special theory about karma. And well, you know it, but I tell it for the listeners who didn't know it yet. Karma, of course, is well, in my opinion, is a natural phenomenon, is a natural law. But they have twisted the karma theory into thinking that you can put your own karma onto someone else's shoulders by predictive programming. So you, in hidden messages, you explain what you are going to do, and then if no one says no, I don't want it, then the karma is not on the perpetrator but on the one who didn't say I don't want it. Well, that's a whole story, predictive programming. Everyone can look it up on the internet and find lots of stories about this. For instance, the predictive programming in movies and cartoons before 9/11. It's mind-boggling. So from there on, I came to the difficult to swallow bit. Let me put it that way. Anyway, I had swallowed a lot of it before 2015 when the Hampstead case came on the internet. So I knew about things like satanic ritual abuse. I wrote a piece by the name of "Coming to Light." It's it's on YouTube for people who are interested. And I wrote a preface with things that I've now explained here, and together with a lot of YouTube links to make it more accessible that this is really going on. A few days later, I discovered that many of those links had been removed. Well, you know also that there's a lot of removal of such stories on the internet, and the term fake news has been invented to suppress these kind of things. But the good thing now is, and I'm very happy with that, the International Tribunal for Natural Justice has been founded in 2015, and there are lots of testimonies to be heard on YouTube by victims of all kinds of sexual abuse, of satanic ritual abuse, etc. And for anyone who has difficulty in taking this all in, I would like to invite him or her to go to YouTube and listen to a number of such testimonies. And then it's not one testimony by itself that is important, but what I would call the cumulative effect of many testimonies. During the years, I've now come across, I think, literally hundreds of testimonies, and the striking thing is that they are very similar in nature. And I can't believe that all these people have agreed among themselves to tell similar stories. So that makes things for me easier to present, that there are really such things going on as that you mentioned in your preface, Alfred, and similar to the weird things that the children in Hampstead have described. And on top of the ITNJ testimonies, you have, I would like to mention a few names, just, to have them out. The testimony of a woman naming herself Svali. You can find it on the internet. David Shurter, retired and later probably murdered ex-CIA chief Ted Gunderson. Mark Passio. There is also a YouTube film with the title 15 years old survivor of satanic abuse tells her story from 1989. So there is so much going on simultaneously and cumulatively that, it's difficult to just push it all away. Then you have also some things that have been proven up till now. And of course, everyone knows about the sexual abuse in the Catholic Church. And also, by the way, the tendency to, and the beautiful word is to exonerate such horrific crimes committed by priests. And just to let it sink in, priests damaging children by sexually abusing them, they should be the last people on earth to do such things, because it's heavily traumatizing to do such a thing. So exonerating priests is a very strange thing to do. And of course, also outside of the church, you find that sexual abuse of children is often treated astonishingly mildly. Not always, by the way, but in some cases also you see a prison term which is far less than the prison term of Sabine. Then you have some famous names. In Belgium, so the neighbor country of Holland, you had Charles Dutroux some decades ago, who is now officially depicted as someone having acted on his own then, together with his wife. But there's so much going on. There's so much rumors about his connections to high circles in Belgian and international politics that, anyone who now searches for this, he finds so much. Then in Britain itself, we had Jimmy Savile, who could live on until old age. And now it has become clear that he has abused hundreds, if not thousands, of people, and probably has done far worse things than that. Also, it's proven he had connections with the highest circles, for instance, with the British monarchy. You have now more and more people speaking out about Hollywood, about pedophilia in Hollywood. What has come into the open is the Hollywood director Harvey Weinstein. He has been convicted also. That's proven that he has abused many women. Let me be honest, not children, women. You have Jeffrey Epstein, also friend of many mighty influential people, who was convicted for pedophilia. He spent 13 months, mind you, 13 months in prison for having abused I don't know how many people. Actors who have spoken out about sexual abuse in Hollywood: Mel Gibson, Corey Feldman, Elijah Wood, later retracted by the way, Isaac Cappy. Well, the story goes on and on. And again, not everything needs to be true. That's what I also say about the Hampstead case. There is, of course, theoretically or not, there is the possibility that not 100% of the children's story is true, but the sexual abuse should be the starting point and not the weird things. So, yeah, I think that's this part of the story so far, Alfred. If you like, I could tell you a bit about my personal involvement and what I've done as a composer so far.
Yes, please do share that.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
okay. Well, I came across this Hampstead story in 2015. So when it came on the internet, I did write a few articles about the case. They were published somewhere, and I got into contact over the internet with some of the players. First of all, with Sabine McNeill, of course, and also with Belinda Mackenzie, the other person. And then I wrote 2 small pieces for fanfare orchestra. Fanfare orchestra is a type of wind orchestra. It's typical for Holland and the neighboring countries. Just to cheer them up a little bit. One of them is on YouTube also. It's Prelude for, and I forgot the title, but well, I can send you a link if you like. And this was the start of correspondence with McNeill, and this correspondence has continued until this day because she and I are corresponding also now while she is in prison. And at an early stage in the development of the Hampstead story, Sabine had to flee Britain, and she had to escape arrest. So she went to her native country, Germany. And in the meanwhile, I had found out that she loves poetry very much, and she had also published somewhere on the internet one of her favorite poems. Das Leben, das ich selbst gewählt. So the life I chose myself. And I so much liked this poem, which in fact is about reincarnation, life before birth, and karma, that that's very much in my line. So I decided to set it to music. So it's also on YouTube to be found there. The life I chose myself. I won't read it. It's for people who are interested. The whole text, including the translation by Sabine herself, is in the description box beneath the YouTube film. So I just did it not only to do something nice for Sabine in her situation of exile, because I didn't know her personally, and nor did I ever see her until this moment. We only had correspondence. By the way, I would like to mention this also. So Sabine is being depicted as an evil, old, deluded lady. Well, the way that we have our correspondence indicates something very differently. For instance, someone who believes in karma and reincarnation, I think he has come to the conclusion that if you want to be effectively egotistical, then you'd better be nice to other people, because that amounts to the very same thing. What I do hope is, if this knowledge about karma stretches out more and more across the planet, that this will end some of the bad behavior of people, because then everyone will know that he will only harm him or herself by doing so. So I think this is what Sabine realizes too. And then you don't do such things as what she is accused of, because for one thing, you are too egotistical to do so, if you understand what I mean. So that's basically how I came into this whole story. And well, to complete the musical, the thing that I have done as a composer so far, when I heard that she was arrested, I thought this was so Kafkaesque that I selected a number of text by Franz Kafka from many of his books, in such a way as to make a story about a whistleblower. And I got a commission to write a song cycle for this. And this song cycle is also dedicated to Sabine. So it's yet another piece dedicated to her. And this will be premiered in December of this year, because it's for wind orchestra and voice. So it takes some time to practice it. Well, that's so far this part of the story, Alfred.
Well, that is remarkable, and with your permission, we would like to, at the end of this interview, when it's published, we would like to publish also the the composition that you created for Sabine, as well as the poetry that's set to music, so that people who watch this interview, when it's completed, can also participate in the composition and then participate in the poetry, and they can see the thing as a whole, because I think that raises the vibration here and raises the entire ethical and consciousness perception of the audience that begins to participate here, and they begin to understand what's at stake here. I know that people may not understand this, but England is the headquarters of the system of evil on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
And we have held extensive interviews with hermeneuticists, that is, decoders of prophecy, who have come to the conclusion over many years, more than a decade, that if you look at major prophetic works in the Old and New Testament and other prophecies in the Book of Revelation, there is there is a prophecy of 666, and that is the embodiment of the world ruler for the system of evil, and that Prince William of the British throne is 666, the embodiment of evil, and he's being groomed by the Sanhedrin state of Israel as the future world king for the evil regime that would rule the world, and those are the world powers that have been behind the false flags, behind the Hampstead pedocriminal rings, behind the false flags at Westminster, the Westminster Bridge behind 9/11, that interact with the interdimensional negative spiritual beings who are Draco Reptilian and uh, Orion Gray and part of the Lucifer rebellion. So that ties into all the Luciferian cults that you've been speaking about. Uh,
May I
yeah,
a little bit here? Also, this for at least uh, listeners from my circles, this is another new element, the Draco reptilians. You might have mentioned archons and things like that. This is people may think this is also very difficult to take in. I have a personal approach to this, if I may. And then I would like to start with near-death experiences. I'm very much interested in this topic, and I'm very happy that it's becoming more and more open, and you are being taken more and more seriously if you talk about this, far more than, let's say, 20 years ago. So also there you have testimonies that are in the thousands and thousands and extremely similar in nature. So you can conclude from this that the soul is immortal and that life goes on after death. And from this departure point of near-death experiences, about which I read a number of books, I went on to see if there is information about life after death. And then I found a number of books, all from the first half of the previous century, that are also very similar in what they describe. And you can find them, they are free on the internet, you can find them everywhere. One of the is Life in the World Unseen by Benson Borgia. You have A Wanderer in the Spirit Lands, you have 30 Years Among the Dead, you have Gone West. All those search terms alone, they are enough. And when I focus on one of the books, my favorite one is A Wanderer in the Spirit Lands. And by the way, it's a great story about love and romance and from dark to light and lots of adventure and very demonic stuff being solved. It's great for an opera. So it's one of my dreams to make an opera one day out of this story. But there, for instance, there is the description of very dark entities living off the fear and anger, so low vibration energy of people, and trying to create events where they can create this low energy. This I found very striking because this book is way before 1945, the year when the Nag Hammadi was discovered. So it's way before a word like archons existed in the world as we know it now. And the description of these low entity beings quite matches the description of the archons in the Nag Hammadi picture. So for me, that's a point of correlation which I found very intriguing. And so for me, such books are the starting points, and from there you can go on to Draco reptilians, whatever you like. But for me, it makes it far more accessible than just to start with Dracos and reptilians. But go on.
yeah, no, that's a very good point that you raise. Um, and yes, I'm familiar with with that with that literature, and myself are now uh, working on my third book on the Omniverse,
Yes.
called Emergence of the Omniverse, and its its particular focus is on the dimension of the afterlife and of life after death. So, uh, uh, or as we say, the interlife, life
Yeah.
between lives. Yeah.
Yes. One of
So
the times.
yeah. So the I I really deeply appreciate the perspectives that that you are taking on this, and that you're bringing to it, to this case, which is the wider omniversal perspective here, uh, uh, to this case, and in a way, uh, the uh, the pedocracy, or the pedocriminal bureaucracy, I believe, is choosing to make an example of Sabine, because she is a witness to consciousness in this case,
Mhm.
and uh, she is directly facing the most evil and heinous acts, and she's doing so in the belly of the headquarters of the system of evil on the planet, which is England, and in the Hampstead pedocriminal ring that uh, re- reached up to the pedocriminal rings in the Prime Minister's office. And don't forget that the current Prime Minister of England, uh, because I know that Scotland now wishes to become independent. That's how they voted, and they wish to stay in the EU. That's how their vote is, as does uh, perhaps Ireland will unite, and that the current Prime Minister May, in her previous role as Home Secretary, actually uh, one of her jobs that she did, which probably qualified her to be Prime Minister of the System of Evil, the headquarters of the System of Evil, was that she got rid of and blocked the parliamentary inquiry into the pedocriminal rings in England, which reached up to the Houses of Parliament.
Mhm. Yeah. Funny
Yeah,
thing, I came across her. I didn't know her name. I came across her name first of all in connection with the Hampstead case,
yeah,
and indeed blocking things like that. Yeah, and
yeah,
no,
yeah,
I had no
and,
idea that she would be prime
yeah,
minister.
and and she is the one that is attempting to lead the people of England into a an economic debacle
Hmm.
without any planning. Uh, uh, you know, into this double blind bluff of a no deal Brexit, my way or the highway.
Yeah.
Today being February 24th, 2019, and March 26th, less than, about 30 days from now. Uh, we'll see what's going to happen. But with
Time will
regard to
tell.
Brexit,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
Brexit breaks it.
Mhm.
So all of these things are caught up because England is entrapped right now in what I call a pedocracy, and that is a pedocriminal bureaucracy which reaches up to uh, uh, the monarchy, the British monarchy, which is a pedocriminal monarchy, we know by the evidence, and reaches up to the Houses of Parliament, we know by the evidence of many cases that have come up, and by the involvement of David Cameron and uh, Prime Minister May in the Hampstead case,
Yeah.
and in the uh, parliamentary inquiries and the blocking of the parliamentary inquiries into pedocriminal circles in England.
Mm.
So um, And the irony is that England comes from the uh, Anglo-Saxon angel land,
Hmm.
more like fallen angel land in this case.
Well, yes, yeah,
Um, so this is quite the analysis that you've done here, and it's extremely deep. Um, I wanted to ask you, um, people who are listening to this now, who may want to, you know, they they may be activated. We were covering the issue of the Hampstead pedocriminal ring, of these two children, of the mother and her partner very intensively, and then of course, it went through its own iteration, and now with the unjust sentencing of Sabine McNeill to 9 years because unlawful sentencing to 9 years imprisonment, totally contrary to the evidence, to the medical evidence, which showed that the children were sexually abused and assaulted, and with injuries consistent with their story that they were subjected to a pedocriminal ring in Hampstead, England, um, that was enforced by their school authorities, by the police authorities, and by others in Hampstead. Um, I can see people of conscience listening to this broadcast and getting reactivated and saying, what can we do about this?
yeah.
What can people do about this?
That's a good question.
I know that you contacted Sabine McNeill's lawyer, attorney, who is bringing an appeal.
Yes.
Is that something? Can they assist in that, or is there something else? Uh,
Well,
uh, I, our news agency, News Inside Out, would be happy to forward any offers of assistance that we receive. Uh, our email address, we'll put it there, is news@newsinsideout.com, and we would be happy to forward it to uh, Sabine McNeill's attorney. Uh,
I think that's a great idea,
yeah,
Alfred. So, so um, it doesn't. I don't have to give her the solicitor's email address. It doesn't have to be public in this way, and
yeah,
it's possible that she wouldn't object to this, but I haven't asked her. And in this
yeah,
way,
yeah,
yeah, it would be a very elegant solution indeed. Yeah.
yeah. So we could do that because we of course haven't consulted here with her, and people can also go on Facebook. There's a Facebook uh, page, I believe.
Yes.
Uh, Let me see if I can. It's called Free Sabine Hampstead Whistleblower, and that's on Facebook. And it's facebook.com/free Sabine. And you can get in touch with that. You can send messages uh, there, and this is truly, I believe that uh, this is a case where the pedocriminal bureaucracy, the pedocracy, the deep state, the pedocriminal deep state in the headquarters of the planetary headquarters of the system of evil, which is England. by the evidence. Um, their monarchy is the head of the system of evil. Their parliamentary government is the head of the system of evil uh, by the way that they're enacting uh, a manipulatory, the results of an economic manipulation that they did on their people with false advertising. Um, uh, you know, uh, and with a pedocriminal prime minister who's covering up the Hampstead case and who covered up the parliamentary pedocriminal inquiry. I mean, all of the pedocriminals that you mentioned that are UK based, were covered up. Uh, and uh, as you say, the Schadenfreude.
It's an English word too. I've looked
Well,
it up.
I'm just, uh, so I just want to express our collective appreciation for the work for the humanitarian work that you have undertaken here, the research and the memoranda that you have created, and the deep background that you have created are deeply appreciated.
Mm. Thank you, Alfred.
Yeah.
Mm.
Uh, are there any thoughts that you would like to leave our leave our audience with, or?
Well, a few things came to mind. Um, when you want to get an impression of the motivation of Sabine and concerning children, then you can find on YouTube a video, and you can find it when you look at Sabine McNeill and then European Parliament. There she gives a speech about child trafficking in England, and she is very emotional about this. So it doesn't match the picture of again of deluded evil and etc. So that's one thing that I would like to have mentioned. And another thing is about harassment. Also, by telling all this, my intention has nothing to do with harassment. So for that reason, I didn't want to mention any names at all. But I'm not so much interested in perpetrators being punished, also from the perspective of karma. The karma will take care of itself. But if only a little bit of this whole horrific thing is true, and it concerns the damaging children, then the first thing that has to happen is that it stops. And that's the reason why that's actually one of the main reasons why I'm doing this and why I'm occasionally composing pieces that are about this subject. And so that's one of the things that I would also like to people to think about is if you think that anything of this might be taken seriously, then don't look the other way, but dive into it yourself and see if there's anything that you can do yourself to let it stop rather today than tomorrow.
Well, thank you very much, and let's let's see that this effort, uh, which will send out to the world far and far and wide, let's envision that it will that justice will be served, that an unlawful and an unjust sentence will be overturned, that Sabine McNeill will be set free,
Hmm.
and that justice and law here uh, will be vindicated and enforced, and eventually the law of karma will will come true.
Yes, it's
Yeah,
unavoidable. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. It's a a cosmic law.
yeah.
Good. Well, I certainly want to thank you, and so uh, I'm looking forward to the day that you can come and rejoin us here, and I want to ask you to come and rejoin us with progress reports as events unfold and a positive outcome is achieved here.
Yes, it's a wonderful wish. Um, I will be very happy to come back, and indeed, I share your wishes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you also, Alfred.
Okay.
als ich ins neue Leben trat.